As the Israeli Security Cabinet meets for the first time, Prime Minister Netanyahu says the IDF achieved a, quote, tremendous military victory. Hamas leader Khaled Mashal says latest Gaza conflict with Israel is not the last. And militants fighting with Al-Qaeda's Syrian wing have reportedly kidnapped soldiers of the UN Disengagement Observer Force in the Golan Heights. Good evening, I'm Shachar Peled. You're watching i24 News. As we speak, the Israeli Security Cabinet is convening since the Israeli-Gaza ceasefire came into effect for the first time. According to reports, numerous members of the cabinet opposed the ceasefire decision, which was reached by Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Ya'alon alone. Earlier this evening, Netanyahu met a delegation from the U.S. House of Representatives Armed Services Committee, headed by Chairman Howard P. Buck McKeon. Netanyahu emphasized that both Israel and the U.S. are, quote, faced with common enemies, radical Islamic terrorists, and compared the ISIS mass executions to what Hamas has done in Gaza. Let's see what Netanyahu had to say earlier while visiting Israel's south and during his meeting with the American delegation.
Hamas has been hit very hard. It's an outstanding military achievement and a political achievement as well. Because at the end of the day, Hamas gave up all of their demands and accepted the Egyptian initiative. They learned it in the hard way, after they tried to contest us again and again. But each time we were able to hit them. But in the last series of strikes, they were finally convinced.
We're faced with common enemies, radical Islamic terrorists who have absolutely no inhibitions on executing people, terrorizing people, targeting innocent civilians. We've just had ISIS conduct mass executions. This is exactly what Hamas has done in Gaza. We've just had a branch of Al-Qaeda right on the Golan Heights kidnap dozens of UN peacekeepers. These are common enemies of Israel, the United States, and all the civilized countries. And I think we should take a common stand to defeat them.
Meanwhile, Hamas leader Khaled Mashal has addressed the press in Doha, Qatar, declaring a Hamas victory and that Israeli leaders are looking for a psychological win, saying, quote, it is our duty to rebuild Gaza as soon as possible, and without the support of the Gazans, we could not have won this war. According to Mashal, the latest Gaza conflict with Israel is not the last, and the reconstruction of Gaza is the duty of the National Unity Government and the free world. Mashal also compared the situation in Gaza to the Holocaust, saying the Holocaust in Gaza is double than in the times of Hitler. And meanwhile, Israel's northern border is now heating up. The United Nations has confirmed that militants fighting with Jabhat al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda's Syrian wing, kidnapped 43 soldiers of the UN Disengagement Observer Force in the Golan Heights, most of which are soldiers of Philippine origin. Meanwhile, Syrian jets reportedly shelled rebel positions near the border crossing close to the Golan Heights today, after the border post was seized by rebels there yesterday morning. However, a source from al-Nusra said resistance groups were, quote, holding ground despite the heavy bombardment by Assad's jets. i24 News correspondent Uri Shapira has the details.
2 days after the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, another danger is rising in the north. Dozens of UN peacekeepers from the Philippines were abducted in the Syrian Golan Heights Thursday by the militant Islamic group the Al-Nusra Front, a day after the organization, along with other Islamic factions, captured the Quneitra crossing point, separating Israel and Syria. Now, when the Syrian rebels are knocking on Israel's door, residents of the Israeli Golan Heights are on high alert.
Who will pay the price? All the residents of the Golan Heights. The militias of ISIS will not make difference between us. They will kill everyone. We see videos on TV, Facebook. The danger is getting closer to us.
The Al-Nusra Front, an Al-Qaeda-linked organization, is considered one of the main factions in the Syrian opposition, with around 6,000 fighters. It is mostly active in the southern area of Syria. Lately, the organization gained media attention after the release of American journalist Peter T. Curtis, held captive by the organization for 2 years. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad forces continued to strike the rebels Thursday, but as it appears now, the government is losing control over the southern borders. Israel, which fought numerous battles with Syria in the past, has tried to avoid frontal intervention in the region, still tormented by the Syrian civil war. But as Islamic extremists gain more and more power and the rebels approach the borders, another front is no longer an imaginary option for Israel.
And moving now to Ukraine, following an unexpected attack by Russian forces on the border with Ukraine, the Ukrainian army surrendered a key town and retreated in the face of heavy Russian fire. This follows a summit between Russian and Ukrainian officials earlier this week, in which President Vladimir Putin pledged to secure the Ukrainian border. i24 News correspondent Ayman Siksek has more.
Just one day after the leaders of Russia and Ukraine pledged cooperation in Minsk in order to secure Ukraine's eastern border, Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseny Yatsenyuk announced that Russia was moving forward with its incursion into Ukrainian territory and sending new troops to the town of Novovsk, east of Crimea.
Russia has sent a number of armored personal vehicles, tanks, and troops. We can confirm that Russian military boats are on Ukrainian ground.
Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko cancelled a visit to Turkey following the offensive and addressed the media about the country's immediate plans.
We will initiate calling a meeting of the United Nations Security Council where the world must discuss the deterioration of the situation in Ukraine.
But things seem far grimmer on the military front, as Andrei Lysenko, a spokesman for the Ukrainian military, said Ukrainian troops are battling combined Russian and separatist forces in the towns of Orlivka and Ilyovask in the most blatant infiltration by Russian forces to date. Lysenko added that about 200 pro-Russian rebels and at least 13 Ukrainian service personnel had been killed in the past 24 hours. According to Ukraine's National Defense and Security Council, Russia's military fired Grad rockets into Ukrainian towns before advancing with 2 convoys of tanks and armored personnel carriers. Russia had annexed most of the Crimean Peninsula in March this year. And though it still denies supporting and arming the pro-Russian rebels, fears are now mounting in Ukraine about Moscow's future plans for the country.
And we're moving now live to the Israeli-Lebanon border in the Golan Heights, where our i24 News correspondent Eli Ochenberg is stationed. Eli, what can you update us for this evening?
Well, Shachar, the fighting in the Syrian territory along the Israel-Syria border is intensifying in the last couple of days. Right behind me is the UN compound where the lights are, I hope you can see, where the 43 Philippine peacekeepers were kidnapped today by the al-Nusra rebels. And now it's been quiet, but a couple of hours ago we could have seen the internal fighting. We could have seen missiles in the Syrian territory between the rebels and Assad's military. At the moment, the IDF had decided to reinforce the military presence along the Israel-Syria border, but at the moment there are no significant fear that this internal Syria fighting will leak to Israel. We could see mortar shells land in Israeli territories, as we've seen yesterday, as 4 mortar shells landed in Israeli territories. But again, at the moment, the Israeli security establishment is not underestimating the northern threat, but we're talking about internal Syrian fighting and not something Israel is expected to get involved.
Yes, Eli Ochenberg from the Syrian-Israeli border, thank you very much for this report. And finally, fishermen in Gaza received the news of the open-ended ceasefire in the Gaza war with joy. For the thousands of fishermen dotting Gaza's port, the hopes are for a return to the old 12-mile limit. Fresh fish from the Mediterranean, grilled or fried, is Gaza's favorite dish. Grouper, bream, bass and snapper are prized. Under a second stage of the truce that would begin a month later, Israel and the Palestinians would discuss construction of a Gaza seaport and Israel's release of Hamas prisoners in the occupied West Bank, possibly in a trade for the remains of 2 Israeli soldiers believed held by Hamas. That's all the time we have for now. Join us again in 20 minutes or follow us on i24news.tv and our Facebook and Twitter pages. I'm Shachar Peled. Thank you very much for watching.